And you sold in what year?
2019.
2019. Okay. And at that point, where was the business, and what made you want to sell? Was it just the fact that you didn't really see how you were going to be able to grow this long term to anything bigger than what you had already created, or what were they offering to be able to do? And you gave up full ownership at this point?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So seeing the revenue decline, and then just the extra work I was having to do, and again, being a small company, me shouldering pretty much everything, having to upload to YouTube every day myself, having to maintain the site, having to respond to, fans and support emails and that kind of stuff. And then also operating the label, having to line up releases, having to help clear samples. It became a lot to do just to sustain, barely what we were doing, in our prime. So it's kind of a wake up call to I can't keep doing this. I don't know what the alternative is, and over the years we had a lot of people reach out to acquire us. Most notably was Apple Music. I was in talks with them when they were new.
Wow.
And it was right around the time. Do you remember they did Chance the Rapper's The Coloring Book?
And that's the one that they did the premiere of, the exclusive, right?
Yeah, and that goes back to another thing is
they tried that same model that you did, and it only lasted a couple albums before they said, all right, fuck this, we're not doing this shit anymore. Yeah.
So that was another thing. Chance was somebody that, I did all of his, mixtapes up to that point.
Oh, okay.
I went to him with an offer of 50 grand, I think, for that mixtape. And then I remember a few days before Apple Music released it, his manager Pat called and said Apple offered him 1.5 million.
Wow.
And then, again, that's one of those things like, damn, like I couldn't even get close to that. And I can't be mad at him. You're talking about 50 grand compared to 1.5 plus a bigger platform.
At a certain point, you just got to say, listen, I fuck with you. You'd be dumb as to not take this deal.
Yeah. I did get in trouble though, because I had the zip file earlier, and I actually premiered it on DatPiff because I was a bit spiteful at the time, and that's what ultimately really fueled the talks with Apple Music to then want to acquire us. I uploaded it. People started getting mad because I don't know if Apple Music was a few minutes late or something, but I remember we got like 1 million views on the page in like maybe 30, 40 minutes or so.
Wow.
And I had I can't remember his name. He's the second in charge at Apple Music. Basically telling his whole team, reach out, you got to tell them to, take it down, all that stuff. And in my conversations with him, I had a call the following Monday, because I think it was a Friday they released it, and then the weekend went by. Monday, I remember he called us a competitor, and that was a funny thing to me because, again, we're at our peak, a $3-4 million a year company, and we have Apple Music, which I can't imagine what their annual revenue is, but I'm sure it's in the billions. Calling us a competitor. So we started getting into talks with them. My fault was I never signed a NDA or anything with them, so I kind of gave them the whole blueprint of how we do these releases, how we line up exclusives, just all the details of our business model. Thinking, okay, this could be a partnership. Being acquired by them would be great. I'm sure they can catapult us into the next wave of DatPiff and what it can become. After maybe a month, they just disappeared.
Because what do you think that they would have been able to do with DatPiff in general?
I don't know.
Right.
But I'm a believer in Apple as an innovator in the world. I think Apple has really changed so many things over the last 30 years compared to the previous 100, 200 years, and I think Apple has really advanced us forward. So my thought was, shit, if anybody can do it, Apple can do it. They'll help me figure out how to do it. And they tried. Like you said, it lasted a few months. And then they started to learn the negatives of this business, not just in talking to their lawyers. Their lawyers kept saying, this is a very gray area that I'm sure you want to steer clear of. So then they started thinking about, okay, we'll just do exclusives. Like forget mixtapes or, that whole, business model and culture that they're doing. We'll just do exclusives like The Coloring Book. Ultimately, that then became a conflict of interest with all the labels, because the labels are getting mad that, like, let's say Universal gave Apple a release. Spotify would almost, shadow ban that album or not give it a look. So then
Mm,
the labels were getting pissed off saying, you can't do that because now we give one platform an exclusive. We're getting no love or visibility from any other streaming platform. So Apple eventually made the decision like, we can't do exclusives because we just have to be in bed and working well with everybody, give everybody a fair shot. We can't do that. So,
mm,
um, but my point with that was we've never entertained people reaching out to acquire us because it was never really a vision that we had or something that we really thought to entertain. Apple was the only one just because of their name and their resources. But once I reached the point of I'm getting burnt out, I don't know what else to do myself. The industry is shifting. We just need more hands on deck, more resources put into it, more budget so I can compete. So if it's Chance the Rapper or somebody, I can say you're getting 1.5, but maybe we can give you a quarter million or so, or what I'm saying, just being able to level the playing field a little bit more. I knew that that's not something I could do myself.
mm.
Um, so we had this company that was based here in Santa Monica called Media Lab, and they were only really known at the time for they had a messaging app at the time called Whisper. I don't know if you ever heard of Whisper.
It's still out there, right? It's like anonymous, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So that was really their only company at the time, and their owner had this kind of vision of I want to get into the music industry and the music space. Um, they had already done all their due diligence on us, kind of in the background before they even reached out. So they were the first ones to reach out and essentially say, "You don't need to show us your books. You don't need to do an NDA. We already know enough. What we need to know. We are interested in acquiring you guys." And obviously, at first, you're skeptical. Like that sounds unbelievable. You can say you did all the due diligence. You don't want to look at our books. That sounds a little bit sketchy. But hey, that makes it easy on us. What's your offer?
Mm,
They made us an offer, and I think one of their key points was they wanted to dip their toes into the music industry and music related apps. Um, and a key part of it that they wanted was me to kind of help facilitate that with my industry know-how, my connections, my resources, and things like that. So they made a fair offer for the brand, and obviously the fact that revenues were declining, turning down a couple $1 million was kind of like we could never get this offer again.
mm.
And if they can provide this kind of Silicon Valley backing and the funding and raising money that they're able to do, this really could be the next kind of turning point for DatPiff to last another 15-20 years, maybe in a new business model, maybe in a new way. um
It's crazy because I just coincidentally happened to watch a video like a day or two ago about the state of streaming, and it's like even Spotify can't really turn a profit.
no, I don't think they ever have.
Apple and Amazon consistently do, but it's also like they don't give a it's a rounding area to them, and really they just want to have you as part of the Amazon or Apple
Yeah.
ecosystem. Spotify trying to make money off just music.
Yeah.
They've had all kinds of bad ideas that didn't really pan out. They're giving Joe Rogan $500 million or whatever it is, and
Yeah.
that the podcast thing, like they did bite off a nice chunk of the podcast industry through some of those deals, but hasn't really worked out for them in general. So when you think about how hard it has been for Spotify to compete, you really look at a site like DatPiff and you're like, oh, okay, like that was very much an era in time. It wasn't
Yeah.
really meant
Yeah.
to last because you're having to go to war with these giants that don't give a fuck about even being profitable.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't even believe that Apple Music or Amazon are their music side is profitable. I think it's almost like moving around
Right.
numbers. Amazon as a company on the grocery store, online ordering side is huge.
And if Apple had decided like, oh, in order to fully vanquish DatPiff, we are going to have to spend a couple $100 million a year on buying exclusives. I
Yeah.
mean, because they could have done that. So they only stopped doing that because they didn't have to, because
Yeah.
they carved out their niche so quickly.
Yeah. And I realized that too, and that, even prior to the sale, I was looking into other avenues where how can we be, sustain ourselves? Maybe I have to, kind of enter into these, license deals with these labels so that we can operate as a streaming platform. We can pay royalties. The more I looked into that, I just started to see red, and I'm not talking about red in my face. I'm talking about red on the bottom line, deep red. Like you're not there's no way to turn a profit when you're having to pay licenses to these labels, to pay out royalties. It's I mean, obviously, it's an essential business that we need is the music industry and streaming, but as far as a host of the music, uh, it was almost impossible for me to see a way any business could be profitable hosting every song, every artist, and having to pay out the way, that they do, even though, yes, it's only cents, and I know artists argue about that, but,
Mm.
it's a lot,
It's funny because I'm picturing right now if I owned a DatPiff style site and if I was trying to get a lot of underground rappers to get on it, drill rappers, whatever, it wouldn't even be necessarily an issue of the money. They would be upset about the idea of like, well, I want my YouTube video to have an extra 100,000 views because that's ultimately how people view my success in the
yeah.
industry. And it wouldn't even become a conversation about money necessarily. It would mostly be a conversation about their outwardly facing cloud, and all they care about is their Spotify monthly listeners and
Yeah,
their YouTube view count and
yeah.
whatnot.